Hello, once again, my friends. I know this looks a little strange, me with a headphone. However, just about the time I started to record, guess what? The yard people, the landscapers at our apartment complex, decided to come and mow the lawn. Isn't that just lovely? I'm so thankful, though, that they do come and mow the lawn. So, in order for you to be able to be sure and hear me and maybe not hear the mowers, I put on the headphones. So I guess it's okay. Anyway, we are on chapter 8 of Let the Circle Be Unbroken. These are long chapters, and this one may be in two parts depending on how long it is. So let's get started. Chapter 8. Stacy was changing. In the last year, he had grown more than a foot, making him taller than Mama and nearly as tall as Papa. In addition to his new height, his voice had deepened. One morning several months ago, he had awakened speaking in somebody else's baritone. I told him to clear his throat, but he insisted that nothing was wrong with his throat and informed me that all boys' voices changed. Although I had been aware of Clarence's and Moe's voices cracking up and down the vocal scale, Stacy had undergone none of that. When I asked him why he hadn't, he answered that he was just lucky, he guessed. I suppose he guessed he was lucky as well to have what he called his mustache. A simple fuzz line which he cultivated with delicate daily care, and about which, upon Mama's advice, I wisely kept quiet. He had the change in Stacy been only physical, I think I could have handled it better. But, unfortunately, the change had affected other areas as well. Now 14, he was a very private person, and much preferred to be off by himself somewhere, or with little Willie, Clarence, or Mo, rather than with Christopher John, little man, and me. And I, frankly, resented it. I had always accepted Stacy's need to have friends his own age, just as the rest of us did, but always before Christopher John, little man, and I had been accepted, no matter how grudgingly, in whatever he was doing, and he had to some extent confided in us. Now, too often we were hearing that we were too young to listen to something, or that something or other did not concern us, and the confidences became fewer and farther between. Sometimes, in an attempt to keep things as they had been, I followed Stacy when he went off alone or with one of his friends. Most times he tried to send me back. Other times he simply ignored me. I hadn't yet decided which bothered me most. Once, when Mo came over and he and Stacy crossed the road to the forest, I sat for some time debating whether or not to follow. Finally deciding that I had just as much right to be in the forest as they did, I wound my way among the trees in the clearing, where I found them sitting on the bank of the pond, their backs to me. Neither noticed me as I approached, and not feeling like arguing with Stacy on this particular day, I settled down some feet away without a word to them. With my hands cupping my head and my eyes on the circle of sunlight sifting softly through the magic forest green above, I lay comfortably upon a cushiony mattress of pine needles, enjoying the stillness of the forest and paying little attention to Stacy's and Moe's conversation. After all, I had not come to eavesdrop. But then Stacy said, "You heard any more about J.C. Peters? I mean about her being with Stuart Walker and Joe Billy?" My ears perked up. Anything to do with J.C. Peters these days caught my attention. Mo shook his head. "Nothing, except for that time at school. And, oh yeah, little Willie did say something about Clarice and J.C. walking over to Aunt Callie Jackson's and Stuart and then coming along and offering 'em a ride." But they didn't get in the car, did they? Mo laughed softly. Little Willie said he didn't know about Jaycee's folks, but if Clarice had gotten in that car, by the time Mr. Wiggins had have gotten through with her, she wouldn't have been able to sit for a good week. But you ain't heard nothing else? Mo turned curiously toward Stacy, and I looked at him for a long moment before answering. No, I ain't heard nothing else. He hesitated, glanced out toward the pond, then back at Stacy. How come you so interested in J.C. Peters all of a sudden? What, you kind of like her or something? Now it was Stacy who was quiet. He threw a pebble into the pond and shrugged. Oh, I don't know. I mean, she's pretty and she's smart and she's got a way about her. But you worried about maybe her messing around with Joe Billy and Stewart? Stacy nodded. She messing around with white boys. I don't want to waste my time with her. Again Mo laughed his good-natured laugh. Stacy, man, you'd probably be wasting your time anyway. That girl's 2 years older than you. Stacy laughed too. You probably right. But I don't know. Sometimes I've seen her looking at me like maybe she wouldn't mind me talking to her. Well, you think that? Then you go on then. Won't hurt nothing. Like you said, she is awful pretty and she's real nice. Ain't never heard no bad talk about her, so I wouldn't worry none about Stewart or Joe Billy. I guess I won't. I was thinking maybe this Sunday at church I'd... Oh, confound it! I leaped up from my bed, having realized too late that giant red ants had gotten there before me. Cassie, what you doing down here? Stacy demanded to know as I danced madly about swatting at the ants. The pond, Cassie, Mo suggested. Get in the pond. I took his advice and dashed into the water. It rose cool and soothing to my neck. You all right? Mo asked sympathetically. Yeah, I guess. Stacy, however, showed no concern at all for my discomfort. Cassie, you follow me down here? Didn't you ever think maybe me and Mo had something we wanted to talk about in private? Yeah, something private like J.C. Peters? I retorted, angered by his uncaring attitude. If looks could kill, I would have been finished right there. But Stacy deigned to say nothing further concerning it, choosing instead to change the subject. Mo, how's your cotton coming? Mo smiled at me before he answered, showing at least he cared about my misfortune. It's looking good, he said, his voice lifting as it always did whenever he spoke about his cotton. I think it's going to work out for us this time. You know, I hope you're right, Mo, but don't get your hopes up too high. You know how things turned out last year, and Mo dismissed the reminder with a wave of his hand. I know, but this year it'll be different. You'll see. Stacy looked as if he wanted to say more, then seemed to reconsider. I just hope you're right, Mo. Stacy, Cassie, oh, y'all. We looked toward the trail leading back to the house and waited for Christopher John and Little Man to appear. Twice more they yelled before they actually burst into view. What's the matter? Stacy asked. Y'all, guess what? Cried Christopher John. Y'all ain't never gonna guess, exclaimed Little Man. Well, what? I said. It's Cousin Bud, Christopher John blurted out. He come back. Stacy's face went cold. He's here? Yeah, he's here, Christopher John answered. He just come, and y'all ain't never gonna guess. He brung Suella. That's his daughter. And Mama, she say that makes her our cousin. So y'all come on. Y'all just gotta see her. Oh, she pretty. With that, they turned and without waiting for us to follow, ran as quickly as they could back toward the house. They sure are excited enough, laughed Mo, as I came from the pond. This cousin of y'all's must be something. Stacy stood without saying anything, and the three of us went back to the house. Expecting to find Cousin Bud and his daughter in Mama and Papa's room, we entered the house through the side door. The room was empty, but with the door open to the dining room, we could see Cousin Bud sitting at the table with Big Ma and Mama. Little Man and Christopher John sat on the side bench, but there was no Suzella. Suzella, sorry, I'm saying her name wrong. Suzella. "Come on in and speak to your Cousin Bud," Mama said. "Cassie, how'd you get so wet?" "I fell in the pond," I said as we crossed the room. "How y'all doing?" asked Cousin Bud, smiling. "Fine," I said. Stacy didn't answer. Mama cast a stern eye on him. "Stacy?" Stacy glanced at her, then back to Cousin Bud. "We're fine. You gonna be here long?" Cousin Bud's eyes met Stacy's. I think he must have seen a little of Uncle Hammer there, for he sighed gently and rubbed his chin. "Just a few days. Brung my daughter Suzella, though. She's gonna stay a while." "Where is she?" I asked. "She's in your room, changing," Mama answered. "Why don't you go on in and meet her?" I nodded and left the kitchen, eager to see this Suzella. All the boys went with me as far as Mama and Papa's room, where they settled in chairs around the darkened hearth. Bring her on out here, Cassie," Mo softly instructed. "I want to meet her, too." "Thought you said you couldn't stay long," teased Stacy. "Did, but there ain't no way I'm going 'fore I see your cousin in there." I pushed open the door and went in. Standing on the far side of the room, on the other side of the bed, was a tall, slender girl. Her head bent downward as she pulled a flared A-line skirt over her hips. Her skin had a creamy cast, but was not as pale as I had thought it would be, and her hair, which hung loose and long, enveloping her face so that I could not see it, was auburn, with deep silky waves. She zipped the skirt, which clung neatly to her womanly figure, and looked up. Her face had the same square-jawed cut of Mama's people, and, except for the gray eyes and the creamy skin tone, her resemblance to Mama was striking. A smile spread brightly across her face as she saw me, and she said, "You must be Cassie." I nodded. "Well, I'm Suzella, but you can call me Sue if you want. That's what my friends at school call me." I started to say that I thought she didn't have any friends, but deciding that it would be impolite, I said nothing at all. "Daddy told me about you," she continued. "Did?" "Mm-hmm. He told me about all of you, Stacy, Christopher John, and Little Man. I already love Christopher John and Little Man. They're adorable. Is Stacy here?" I motioned toward the door behind me. "He's out there." "Oh, really? I really want to meet him too. Daddy says we're nearly the same age." "He ain't but 14. Suzella picked up one of her dresses from the bed and laid it neatly over a chair. "Well, I'm 14, so I guess a year's not so much. I'm 15, so I guess a year's not so much." "Uh-huh. You gonna be here long?" "Well, I don't know. Daddy's going back in a day or so, but he wants me to stay a while." "He going back to New York?" Suzella nodded. "Alone? I mean, he's going to live by himself?" Suzella had just reached for another dress from her suitcase. She stopped and looked at me. "No, my mother's there." "She is? But I thought that she—" I stopped short, realizing that I was about to say too much. Suzella glanced down at her suitcase, then back at me. "Did Daddy tell you and him Mother were separated? I mean, they were, but Mother's home again now. They just had a misunderstanding, that's all." I stared at her, and before I took the time to think, I said, "What's it like?" "What's what like?" having a white mama. Now it was she who stared. I mean, I wouldn't even know how to act around her, I contended, baffled by the very thought of a white person living in the same house, let alone having one as a mother. The whole thing seemed incredible to me. Don't you feel kind of funny, her being white and you being colored? The pleasantness of Suzella's face quickly faded, and she said acidly, I am not colored, Cassie. Well, I'd just like to know what you think you are, then. She breathed in deeply, her cheeks reddening, then turned back to unpacking. I'm mixed blood. Same thing. She was silent, her eyes downcast. Taking out another dress, she held it a moment, then looked back to me. You say Stacy's out there. Her voice was soft once more, almost apologetic. Uh-huh. Then I want to meet him. This can wait. Making sure that her sleeveless blouse was fully tucked inside her skirt, she rounded the bed and followed me into the other room. As soon as the door opened, Mo and Stacy stood. Little Man and Christopher John remained seated, but they grinned widely, almost glowing, as they gazed upon Suzella. Suzella greeted Stacy with an adult-like poise, and I could see that the resentment which had been in Stacy's face upon greeting Cousin Bud was not there as he met his daughter. Yeah, well, it's real good to meet you, Stacy said. How long you gonna be here? I don't really know. Maybe the summer. You ever live in the country before? Suzella laughed lightly. No, I was born in New York, and except for sometimes getting to go with Daddy to Jersey, I've never even been in the country. Well, I hear living in the city is a whole lot different from living in the country. Sometimes I think maybe I'd like to try living in the city. He stopped abruptly and glanced over at Mo, who had just nudged him. Oh, you didn't meet my friend Mo yet, did you? Well, this here's Mo Turner. Mo, my cousin, Suzella Rankin. Suzella smiled, displaying even white teeth, and held out her hand to Mo, who took it without speaking. But there was really no need for him to speak. His eyes said it all. I glanced around at each of the boys, from Little Man and Christopher John to Stacy and Mo. It was evident that each was entranced by Suzella. As for me, I didn't know if I even liked her. What are you doing, Cassie? I looked around at Suzella. It seemed perfectly obvious to me what I was doing, sitting on the back porch with one foot in hot water and the other crossed over my leg, and a needle plunged in my big toe. What else could I be doing but pulling out jiggers? I wanted to tell her just what I thought about her stupidity, but reminding myself that she was a guest, I kept my remarks to myself. As far as I was concerned, she asked too many questions, anyway, though no one else seemed to think so. They were all too crazy about her. Since her arrival, she had managed to endear herself to just about everyone. Christopher John and Little Man couldn't do enough for her, and Stacy, who never had time for me anymore, always could find time for Suzella. She was forever in the kitchen laughing and talking with Big Ma, eager to do her bidding and claiming to want to learn her all her recipes, and she had even taken to calling her Big Ma, which didn't sit too well with me. After all, Big Ma was not her grandmother. She also spent a good deal of time with Mama, and the two of them laughed and talked like good friends instead of an aunt and a great niece. At church, she had been met with the same welcome. All the young men of Marian age and boys old enough to be impressed by the female figure turned adoring eyes upon her as soon as she arrived. Mo, dressed in his patched but clean white shirt and string of a tie, had come all the way from Smelling's Creek to attend church, a trek he seldom made on a Sunday, since there was a perfectly good church only a mile from his home. Joining us, he had stood nervously and silently by as Clarence and little Willie, among others of Stacy's friends, had sauntered over and feigned nonchalance. Susella had been cordial to each one, but granted no special attention to any of them. Instead, she had stayed close to Mama and Big Ma and allowed none of the boys a moment alone with her. None the less, everyone adored her, and by the time Cousin Bud left a few days later, she had not only been accepted by the community, but was firmly entrenched in the family circle as well. I, however, was not won over. She was a guest and a cousin, which meant that I had to be nice to her. It didn't mean that I had to like her. When I didn't answer her question, Christopher John spoke up quickly. "She's pulling out jiggers. In summertime, you always got to look out for jiggers, 'cause we go barefooted all the time. Every night before we go to bed, Mama say we got to wash our feet and check 'em real good so's to see if jiggers done got in 'em. But sometimes you just don't see 'em till a day or so later and they get to hurting. And you don't get 'em, they can make you sick, 'cause they get in and they get big," little man added. He turned to Christopher John. "'Member that time old Baker Norris got them jiggers in his foot and didn't get 'em out? That old foot got this big." He demonstrated the swelling of Baker Norris's foot with his hands. "Swole all up." Susella grimaced, then came closer to watch me as I expertly plunged the needle farther into the tough outer tissue of my toe to get at the dark mass below. "Does it hurt?" she asked. I finished tearing back the skin. "Well, too, you gotta go any deeper," contradicted little man. "Uh-oh, there it is." He and Christopher John drew nearer and all watched in curious silence as I gently sank the needle once more into the skin and attempted to slip it beneath the flea. Assured that the needle was in position, I pulled up slowly to extract the jigger, but as sometimes happens, the mass broke in two at the pressure. "Oh, shoot!" I cried. "I better get Big Ma," said Christopher John, getting up. "Hurry, Mama, they's in the field," little man said. "What's the matter?" asked Susella. "Well, once they break, they gets awful hard to get out," explained Christopher John. "And they gotta come on out now or they'll work their way back in. Cassie keep picking at it. She gonna have her foot so sore she won't be able to walk on it." "I ain't gonna get it sore," I retorted, wiping the blood from the needle before plunging it in once more. But the skin did feel tender, and despite willing myself not to, I flinched noticeably. "Here, let me try," said Susella. I looked up at her as if she were crazy, then back at my toe. I wasn't about to let her get near my foot. I started to work again, but Susella softly touched my hand, stopping my attempt. "Cassie, I'm good at this sort of thing. Really, I won't hurt you." "Yeah, I know you won't, 'cause I'm going to do it myself." "Please, Cassie, people say I have a gentle touch. If you feel any pain at all, then I'll stop." "Oh, Cassie, let her try," said Christopher John. I eyed Susella doubtfully as she smiled and took the needle. She sat down beside me and cradled my foot in her lap. Then, as I tensed, waiting for the pain and kicking myself for the fool that I was to let some girl who didn't even know what a jigger was put a needle in my foot, she put the tip of the needle against my skin, but not where I had already opened it. "Girl, what you doing?" I cried. "You've already got it sore there, Cassie," she said without looking up. "It's better I try to get at it from this way." Deftly, she picked open the skin and, probing gently, worked the needle below the black mass. Although at one point I did feel a twinge of pain, I didn't tell her, for the jigger was deep, and there were times when even Big Ma could not extract the creatures without some pain. "There it is! You got him!" cried Little Man as Susella brought out part of the mass. She smiled, then wordlessly went after the rest. When it, too, was out, she sat back, a look of satisfaction on her face. "Did it hurt, Cassie?" she asked. I took my foot from her lap and inspected it. "Just one time, but that's okay." "Wait a minute before you walk on it," she said, standing. "I've got some alcohol my mother packed. We should put some on your toe so it won't get infected." "It ain't gonna get infected," I said. "Well, this way we'll make sure it won't." As soon as the kitchen door closed behind her, Christopher John admonished, "Oh, Cassie, you didn't even say thank you." I looked at him, then back at my foot. "I'll thank her," I said, "if the alcohol don't burn." And I'm going to stop here for right now. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his